Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here today. We are here, a Fireside Chat with Healthmonix and the American Psychological Association. Today, we will be going over helping healthcare professionals cope with the mental behavioral impacts of COVID-19. From Healthmonix, we have Nisha King, our VP of Marketing, as well as Vale Wright and Lynn Bufka from the APA. Just a couple notes to go over real quick. First off, if you take a look at your screen here, you will have an opportunity to ask questions of our team. If we have the opportunity in the last 15 minutes or so, we'll go over your questions. Otherwise, you will get feedback from us after the webinar with answers. Also, we do have a handout that you can grab at the bottom of the screen. After the conference is over, I will be sending this video out to everybody so that they can share or rewatch on their own. For more information on the MBHR, feel free to ask any questions of the contact information below, as well as to sign up, you visit mbhrregistry.com. I will share this information at the end as well. So without further ado, I am going to throw this over to our panelists today. Nisha, kick it off.
Thank you so much, Mike. We're really honored to have our partners at the APA join us today. One of the things that was on Healthmonix's mind as we're trying to survive this pandemic, as everybody else is what is healthcare faced with? How are those professionals coping with the mental and behavioral health issues that are now impacting them, potentially as more patients are coming in and dealing with the after effects of the pandemic. So really, we wanted to offer resources, advice, just anything that we can to the healthcare community along those lines. So with that, if we could start with asking, what type of issues are you seeing now versus pre-pandemic? What are patients and potentially providers coming in and talking about now versus before? What type of support are they looking for?
Yeah, thanks. I'll start it off. I'm Vale Wright, as we mentioned. I'm the Senior Director of Healthcare Innovation at APA. And, I think that everybody's individual circumstances look a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's immune to the stress of what's going on right now, particularly the high level of uncertainty. And that's really what is driving the anxiety and the stress and the distress and the sort of sadness and the fatigue that people are experiencing, is this level of uncertainty, because it makes it really hard to plan. And it reminds us of all the things that are out of our control. So those are the real things that are driving. And then I think when it comes to patients, you probably see some individual differences in there depending on what their situation is. So I think you have people who have never had any experience with a mental or behavioral health disorder that's now experiencing maybe symptoms that require some professional help. And I think you have people that who have pre-existing mental and behavioral health conditions that have been exacerbated. And so things have gotten worse, they've been triggered. But you also have this other group, which is interesting, of people who have maybe dealt or coped with adversity and mental and behavioral health disorders in the past, who have an arsenal of coping skills that are enabling them to actually deal with the stress and the uncertainty of the situation. And in fact, they might even feel validated that now everybody else kind of gets how hard life can be right now. So I think those are some of the things that at least we're seeing, I think, across the general population.
An additional thing that we're seeing, certainly among, say, kids, you're hearing families talk about this, kids who've been super scheduled, who maybe struggle with attention deficit disorder, hyperactivity, the forced slowing down of not being able to go places, while they certainly have missed their interactions with peers and that kind of social connection, there's also been some benefits there for families too, to sort of readjust figure out what their priorities are, and perhaps take a little of that external pressure away to always show up and do all the time. So there have been some things, as Dr. Wright was mentioning, some benefits that some individuals have had, but that's certainly not to take away from the tremendous degree of uncertainty that all of us are facing. And all of us need to be thinking about how do we cope with that and work on what's within our control. And to face the situations that we're experiencing, whether it's because of COVID or many of the other issues facing our country right now as well.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, I mean, we are seeing some research come out that's suggesting that depression rates, anxiety rates, suicidal ideation, and substance use are all increasing as a result of the things that are going on. And there are particularly vulnerable groups within there. Young individuals are one of those. We know that they're really susceptible to loneliness right now and the suicidal ideation. But frontline workers, so healthcare providers, but also other essential workers, are at higher risk of being vulnerable to some of the psychological distress that's occurring at this moment.
And then when you layer in on top of that, when you layer in on top of that, the racism pandemic and the uncertainty in this country, that adds even more distress, concerns, tensions and concerns related to the politics. So it really becomes incumbent upon us as professionals to understand some of the local context that our colleagues are experiencing, what are the kinds of stressors that are really impacting our local community, and that helps us determine how can we best support colleagues as well.
Absolutely. And so walk us through some of the strategies that you're working on with these patients that in fact you as professionals may be implementing in your own lives. Like, I think we forget sometimes that you're essential workers and you are probably dealing with some of the same issues. So what are the strategies that you're using even in your own lives?
Yeah, Dr. Wright and I've talked about this and kind of laughed at ourselves a little bit about this because we've talked over and over and over again about the foundation that we all need for our mental and physical well-being, right? And that foundation is you have to have adequate sleep. You've got to have decent nutrition and hydration. Physical activity is really important, and social connection. We always talk about physical distancing to distinguishing that from social connection. Yet we've had to check in with each other about how are we doing on some of these. And when we finish a talk like this, sometimes we're saying, wait, realized I haven't been very active today. I need to work on that too. So I say that because we are all vulnerable to feeling the impact of stress. And that's a great place to start, to look at, am I doing things to protect my sleep, to get decent sleep quality? I realize it's not always possible. Kids interrupt, loud noises, whatever, but do things so that you have a consistent sleep pattern to the extent that you can, that you're still trying to nourish your body and you're thinking about what you're putting in your body. Because while it might feel great to eat M&Ms in the moment, the next day or later in the evening, you might be feeling, oh, I should have really had some fruit or whatever makes your body feel good. So that's sort of the basics that we always want to start with. But there's other layers of things that are really important to do to take care of yourself. And I'll let Dr. Wright continue with that thought.
Yeah, I think once you've got that foundation, which requires some level of routine, I think, to really be effective, right? So that means, going to bed and waking up at the same times and, trying to really schedule meal times together. You're more effective if you're able to do that. And then once you've got that established, then it really comes down to identifying coping skills that replenish you, that fill you back up, that give you that energy that you may be losing so that you can maintain that emotional well-being. For me, it's exercising. That's what I do a lot of to help. But, I have friends that are baking bread. I have friends that are, again, doing maybe Zoom happy hours. I think the trends that I'm seeing now is we were really pretty good at getting these things done at the beginning. And now as COVID has continued to drag on, I think our fatigue and frustration is sort of taking over the fear or the sort of anxiety that we use to help us kind of get things into a routine. So I think we all need to just sort of take a step back, reflect and say, what could I be doing differently? What could I be doing better? While at the same time engaging in a non-judgmental stance. So that's one of the things I'm really working on, is to not judge myself when I have a bad day, which happens. And to just sort of say, okay, I've had a bad day, but that's all right. I'm going to regroup. I'll start over again tomorrow.
And then I'm hearing from many people where not only is it the pandemic, because we're in month 6 or 7 at this point of sheltering in place for those who can, for adjusting our lives dramatically as a result of it, but we are seeing routine accounts of police shootings, of particularly of Black men. We are seeing incredible discord in our political spheres. We are reading about tremendous uncertainties of potential outcome following the election. And those are things that we may not have direct control over. Those are the kinds of things that also create additional uncertainty. So one of the things that I find helpful to think about are, maybe I don't personally control the outcome of the election, but I can vote. I can enable others to be able to get to the polls to vote, or I could work as an election judge or election worker in my local community to ensure that voting happens with as few disruptions as possible. Or if I'm particularly concerned about what's going to happen with replacing the Supreme Court justice, I can take action in that vein. Or if I'm concerned about what's happening with policing in my community, I can reach out to the police commission or Citizens Advisory Board, try to be engaged, because we find not only does that help us feel that we're doing something positive about issues that are concerning to us, it will connect us with individuals who share similar questions and concerns. That helps us with the social connection, and it also gives us a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning. And that's actually very critical to our overall psychological well-being too, to feel that what we're doing makes a difference and has value in our day. And it often helps to focus at the local level, where we feel that we can have more of an impact, because the national level feels so big. But our local community, we know what's happening. We have more opportunity to engage and potentially shape where we're headed.
Great. Just to kind of return back to something you said a few minutes ago about people having fatigue at this point and you seeing more people seeking support. Do you feel like it's actually more people coming to come in for the support, or is it just, I mean, versus the early days of the pandemic, or is it just more that people are realizing, okay, something has to change. I can't keep going on as I was before.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the level of chronic stress that we're feeling right now. So everybody experiences stressors in their life, but ideally, whatever causes the stress, a test, moving, whatever the case may be, it ends, it goes away. But in situations like this, where there doesn't seem to be an end in sight, that chronic stress over time has both an emotional and a physical effect on us. And so physically, it can look like muscle tension and increased heart rate and fatigue and irritability and depression and anxiety, the things we've been talking about. And so that's why it's so critical that we take active roles to try to manage the stress and to focus, like Dr. Bufka was saying, on the things that are in our control. Because that gives us a sense of stability and like we're able to engage in some level of controlling in our life. Whether people are seeking out more treatment or a formal support, the research seems to be pretty mixed at this point. Some online sites are saying that they've seen an increase. We know there's been an increase in crisis hotlines, for example. But whether individuals are seeking out professional mental health providers, some of our members are reporting increases, some are reporting decreases, some are reporting things are staying the same. So I think at this point, it's a little too early to tell. But I think what I was referring to is it felt like we had a more we're all in this together feeling a few months ago. And as this has gone on, and it feels like we're not looking out for each other quite like we were before. And I think it's the culmination of stressors that Dr. Bufka was referring to as well, that things start to just feel so overwhelming when you've got wildfires and hurricanes all happening at the same time. So again, I think it's about all of us just sort of recalibrating and using this time right now to really ask ourselves, okay, what are the things that I'm doing that are helpful? And how can I create a life worth living, knowing that we are going to be in this situation for a while? And what can we do as a family, as a community, to really, remove some of that pain and really find that gratitude and that sort of that place where things feel meaningful still.
And we don't know when things are going to change and go back to whatever normal was.
Absolutely.
Right. And there's no sense that what we considered normal is where we're going to go back to for any time soon. So it's hard to think about our future in that way. So focusing on what we're able to address and plan helps us. Okay, I know I'm going to be teleworking for another 6 months. How do I want to set up my home to best help me do that? Or I don't anticipate I'm going to be traveling, for a vacation anytime soon. If I have vacation time, how can I use it in a way that restores me, that feels good? It's great to organize your house and clean out your closets and everything. And many people find that very helpful. Other people are like, no way is that a vacation. Let me go somewhere. And maybe you start looking at day trips that you can make where you can be outside. I think we're seeing people take tremendous advantage of the weather that we have right now and enjoying being outside, because we know that from a COVID point of view, that's a much safer way to be out and about rather than be gathering indoors. So we really encourage people to take advantage of that. We've always known being outdoors is good for your mental health. We also know right now it's particularly good for lowering the risk of transmission. So we really encourage people when they can to use outdoor venues as ways to get out and be active and physically distance, but still socially connect.
And I think we need to be thinking about how things are going to look a little different this year when it comes to things like holidays. And to go into it with the expectation and the plan that things are going to look different. But what kinds of opportunities can I find within that difference? Are there new traditions that I can start up this year? Are there new opportunities that I hadn't really thought of before because I've always been doing things the same old way? So I think we need to be really planful about the rest of this year, knowing that for the most part, this situation is not going to change, but the weather's going to change and holidays are coming and there's more stressors on the forefront. So really, again, being active and planful where you can be, I think is also an important step for people to be taking.
Right, and Dr. Wright, you talked a little bit earlier about some of the physical manifestations of someone that's kind of under duress, experiencing stress. How can healthcare professionals look out for the warning signs and help create an environment within the practice that really demonstrate that there's no shame if someone needs to seek out support? So I guess the first part of that question is, what are some of the warning signs as opposed to the physical signs?
Well, often some of the physical signs are the warning signs because they're almost always what people identify with first when they're stressed. Like I bet a lot of our viewers right now could relax their shoulders. I bet you're going up to your ears right now. So it's often subtle things that we're doing, but people under stress maybe can't identify that that's what's happening to them. We'll approach their primary care physician first with things like muscle tension or headaches. Those are two pretty clear signs, and GI symptoms, so stomach problems, are another really common one that people don't often identify with stress. I'm also hearing from the dental community that people are coming in with broken and cracked teeth because people are teeth clenching so much and grinding their teeth at night from the stress. So those are some of the things that I think are the warning signs for providers to say, okay, so tell me a little bit more about what was happening before you had that headache. Or what sort of things are going on in your life right now? How are you managing your stress? So that we don't just think it's only a physical symptom, but really it's the physical and the mind which work together. And I think those are some of the critical warning signs when it comes to physical, at least, symptoms.
And if you as a health professional are thinking about what's happening with your colleagues, so Dr. Wright's talking about individuals that may be coming into your practice and showing signs of stress. What are the warning signs in your colleagues? Some of the questions might be, are people's work productivity changing? Are they showing up on time? Are you concerned about their attention to detail? So those are often signs that people are struggling a little bit more, that maybe they need to reach out and that there might be things to do. And we are so used to, as healthcare professionals, giving and wanting to help others that it becomes really important to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as well. We are not going to be nearly as effective in our work if we're struggling. And if we are not really feeling up to our best as well, we're not giving the best to our patients, our clients. So that becomes imperative to do that. If you're in a work situation where you have some capacity to talk about how you're managing your stress, showing people, yeah, I get stressed out too. And when that happens, I know I just shut off all the news. I go pick up a trashy novel. I tell everybody, don't interrupt me for the next 45 minutes when I'm at home, just to have some peace and quiet, or whatever it is, that's what I do. Or if you've really been struggling, letting your colleagues know some days are hard for me. And when they're hard, I might ask you to do X, Y, or Z. That often opens it up for others to have to say the same kind of thing. And together in the work, whether it's a primary care practice, a big outpatient clinic, you might come up with some ideas for how do you do it, continue providing the valuable work you're providing, but in ways that support your colleagues. Perhaps you decide we need to have a private outside space that's only for staff, so that if somebody needs a break, they have a place they can go to where they're not going to get interrupted with patients and clinical demands, but have a place that they can just sort of relax. Maybe you can't set that up immediately, but if there's a little nook with some beautiful plants and a chair where somebody can just sit and catch some sun for a few moments, that can help people recenter and come back into what they're doing. So it's really going to be important for healthcare practices to think about what resources they have and how can they be creative about creating an environment that fosters everybody's emotional and physical well-being.
Yeah, I think it's about engaging in the conversations, demonstrating that it's okay to talk about these things, that there isn't a stigma attached, and then modeling those healthy behaviors, right? So it's encouraging employees to take their vacation time. It's making sure that they know that if they are not feeling well, that they should not come into work, and that doesn't mean they're going to lose their job. So job security, ensuring that like you have resources like Dr. Buffett was talking about, the PPE that they need to feel safe, both physically, but also the resources they need to feel safe emotionally. And so I think those are all the things that we can do as employers to help support those that work for us.
And I guess one more thing I want to add to that, where many of us are in virtual environments. If you are in any sort of supervisory capacity and you're sending emails at 10 o'clock at night, you're telling the people who work with you they should be working all the time too. And so really think about that, the messages you're conveying. Yet, but perhaps you've worked out a flexible schedule because you've got kids at home, so you can't be working between 4 and 8. So you've agreed from 8 to 10 is the time you're going to catch up on things or whatever. But really be very cognizant of that, because it's something that people struggle with. It's very hard in virtual worlds, and some healthcare, I've seen my primary care provider via telehealth these days. So I know it's happening across healthcare where there is more blending of work and home, and the things that we can do as managers and supervisors to help people create space between that through our actions and our discussion about expectations will help people have the place to go to, even if it's shut the laptop down and walk away. That indicates the end of my day. Becomes really critical to help people get that space and time in order to do the things that do restore them and help them let go of some of the stress of the day.
Right. And so what are some of the strategies that you've seen practices leverage to really provide that environment of, showing that there's no shame and really trying to help employees realize that there are various resources at their disposal, and not just kind of saying, hey, here's the EAP line, really almost hand holding them and letting them know that they really do care and want to support their mental and behavioral health.
Now, we've seen a range of responses in that domain, and it depends in part on how big the practice is, how large it is. We have seen in places where it's really frontline health workers working with individuals with COVID. There's an intervention, a way of being with individuals called psychological first aid that really tries to address the basics of what people need during a crisis. And we're seeing increased training in that. We're finding that In hospital settings, there might be a handful of staff who are trained in that, which elevates their ability to identify people at risk who are struggling and to provide some of that basic support and contact to individuals. That may not be what is necessary in all kinds of practice settings. So opportunities to have a discussion with the team about what's going on and hearing their ideas about what would be most helpful is a great place to start. We know that some of the basics are ensuring people have the resources to do their job. Right now, that means PPE, but that also means having access to the technology that they need to do their work, to having sufficient time to do everything that's demanded of them. So really checking and ensuring that everyone has the resources they need to do their work and to understand what the expectations are for the work. That may not seem like something that is a response to self-care and dealing with stress, but it absolutely is, because if you don't have the resources to do your job, that's only going to add to the stress that you're experiencing. But then thinking about things like, how do we schedule our workflow? Are there ways that we can think about how we schedule time off or stagger shifts or look at aspects of the work to ensure that people have breaks during the day? Some offices may decide that it's important for all of us to take a lunch break at the same time so that we don't get pulled into meetings with patients and consultations when someone's over in the corner trying to eat lunch. So there are lots of creative ways to do that. I've seen hospitals and other large practices create break rooms that are just for staff, where they have access to mindfulness apps and meditation and workbooks or CDs, anything like that. So there's great opportunities to re-envision how you structure work in order to support overall well-being.
And I think the things that I would add, I've also seen some organizations that have set up hotlines for employees, for healthcare providers, that connect them to a mental behavioral health specialist that they can have conversations with, when they need them to help kind of get that support that they need, or other groups that have come in and done sort of peer, sort of structured peer support groups at the end of a shift to come together and to, again, sort of express gratitude and tell each other that you're doing a good job. It's creating, I think, those social connections in addition to ensuring resources. That's critical. And then I think the final part, and we've alluded to this a little bit, is that level of communication. Communication, particularly from those in charge and in leadership positions, letting employees know that they are valued, letting them know that they, making sure that you're communicating what sort of plans and procedures organizations are engaging in to keep everybody safe. And again, modeling that sort of self-care behavior, that taking vacation time, that, putting down, the phone and closing the laptop, like Lynn said. I think those are all really important things that leaders need to communicate in order for others to feel comfortable and safe to do it.
Hey, it's Mike again. I'm just going to break in here real quick and suggest that if you have questions for our expert panel, that you get them in now that we're about 30 minutes into this webinar. We'll be getting to them in about 15 minutes. So if you have questions, ask away now. This is the best time to get a hold of our experts. Thank you, guys.
I did want to follow up on something you said earlier. I forget which one, but there was a statement along the lines of people having access. So we're talking about being creative and how practices can find ways to provide resources. What about when you've extended kind of past the allotment that insurance might provide, and what are some other ways that we can make healthcare professionals know that there are other resources and even new resources that are emerging as a result of COVID?
Yeah, so, at APA, we've certainly been cultivating lists of different resources to help that are geared towards a variety of different groups, whether it's parents or whether it's healthcare workers. I think really where I'm seeing a lot of the innovation is within the technology space, is really leveraging technology to help reach those that are the most vulnerable and need assistance. And so whether that's an app or whether that's texting or just modules and webinars like this, to really continue to reach out. I think we have to take multiple approaches. There's not just one size fits all for sure. And the extent to which we can be creative and even small things. I think we don't need to. I don't think we need to overthink everything all the time. I mean, we had a call. I'm going to call Lynn out here for a minute, but we have a colleague who's really struggling, not for COVID reasons, but because her kid was sick with something else, and so Lynn brought her food. Right? Like it's kind of coming back to our roots of what we do to help support people, and that doesn't have to be some sort of big massive thing. It can be very small gestures that I think restore our humanity and provide us with that sense of mental and social kind of connection that we need. I think back to the stories I heard about, in New York City, individuals coming out on their balconies and clapping and banging at the end of the shift to let people know that they're heard and that they're seen. I imagine that doesn't take away the hard day that they had, but it does let them know that they're valued, and that has tremendous potential to it.
And one of the things that's so wonderful about that is the other person feels supported and you feel good too. So things like reaching out to individuals that you think might be struggling. I don't know anyone who doesn't like to get something in the mail. And so sending people cards, letters, funny jokes that you've seen is sort of a welcome surprise at the end of the day that reminds somebody that you've been thinking of them, that you're concerned about their well-being. It also feels nice when you're writing something because you're thinking about somebody you care about, and that engenders warm feelings too for you. So that there are ways that we can try to connect that helps us support each other in ways that we've perhaps forgotten about. It's so easy to text. It doesn't feel quite as warm and personal as somebody taking the trouble to find a paper and pen and find a stamp and find your address. So there are ways like that that we can try to connect with others that lets them know that we value what they're doing. It's great to have all of the technology ways of connecting, but lots of people like the ability to connect in other means as well. So those are helpful for each of us to do. There are lots of ways to support how we feel physically. Lots of us have been told to relax. Well, if it was just that easy to relax, nobody would be stressed out, right? But there are great things you can find online. And you can look up something that's called progressive muscle relaxation or diaphragmatic breathing. You can find free instructions for this kind of stuff online and practice it and get good at it. I've been teaching diaphragmatic breathing for probably 30 years at this point. And I know that individuals find it extraordinarily helpful. It just takes the level down just a notch so that we become a little more productive in our thinking, a little less wired up in how we're approaching things. Physically, we feel a little bit better. And then that enables us to look at things with fresh eyes. So basic things that we might think are very basic that we kind of lose track of, right? As Dr. Wright said at the beginning, how many of you are doing this? We're all breathing up here with our chests. Look at how a baby breathes. Their belly moves. When was the last time you really felt like you were breathing through your belly? But that's the way to get really air circulating through your body in a way that's very beneficial to you. So you want to learn how to do relaxing breathing. And there's so many free resources available for these things online that it can be really helpful to share them among your colleagues and say, have you tried this? We've got we use Microsoft Teams in my office, and we have a place where we post things like that. Here's a handout I found. I thought this might be helpful for you. Or here's a great new app I saw, so that people can say, yeah, this one really worked for me, or I might want to find something more in this regard.
Hey, so Mike back again, and I have a couple questions from the audience that I'd like to throw your way and see if we can start up some additional conversation, because this has been fantastic. The first one is, do you have any special advice for children during these times, during remote schooling? Any advice for them or their parents to help dealing with them?
Yeah, this is hard, and it really varies on the age level, right? So first of all, how many parents have been told screen time is bad? Well, at this point, kids are on screens all the time. Recognize that screen time is being used for educational reasons. Screen time is being used for social connection. So don't sort of tote up all those hours and think, oh, my kid is getting totally destroyed here. But and try to balance that with time that's not screen time. I mean, just physically, our eyes can't be looking at screens all the time. Our bodies can't be sitting in this position all the time. But it's good to be physically active. It's good to read a book. It's good to play board games. So the more that we can try to balance those kinds of activities with our kids is really important. The age, it really varies. You know, the issues that parents with young, really little kids are dealing with, that has to do with, if you don't have childcare and you have kids under 5, you can't really leave them unsupervised. They get into things. They can't take themselves to the bathroom. They need help eating. There's a lot of parenting that has to happen with that age group. But the kids are probably loving it because they're with you so much more. They have your attention. It's a wonderful experience for them. Grade school is a different set of issues. They're trying to learn. They're supposed to be in school. They really want to socialize. How do you balance those kinds of things? Parents, as Dr. Wright was saying, you know, be a little gentle on yourself. Don't expect perfection. If it's a bad day, start over the next day and try to figure out how you can best help your kids while also meeting the demands that you have as an adult. And that may require talking with your boss. If you're teleworking and your kids are teleworking, how do I balance this? How can I do this in a way that gives what my kids need as well as what you need from me as an employer? It's great when there are 2 adults in the household. It's even greater when there's 3, but that doesn't always happen if you're a grandparent or somebody around. But with COVID, that may not always happen. But sharing responsibilities with the other adults in the house, or enlisting older children in some things that perhaps they weren't doing before. We've often scheduled our kids and had them busy, busy, busy all the time. Well, now's the time where perhaps they learn things about how to clean a toilet, how to set the table, be helpful around the house, things that you would like them to know how to do as an adult. But also will help with keeping the household going more smoothly. But then as you get older, you're looking at tweens, middle school age, who got more academic demands, also trying to figure out peer group kinds of questions. How do you help support them in socializing when we know that they also struggle with effectively using social media and devices to engage? So then parenting is going to take on some different discussions then. What's happening in the chats? What's going on there? How can I learn a little bit more about what's happening here? Because we know that that's an area, a time when there's a lot more bullying going on. It often happens virtually. Older teens, really check in with them, because we are finding, as Dr. Wright said early on, that the young adults and older teens, despite how familiar they are with technology and the potential for connecting that way, are really struggling and feeling isolated. When you think about it, what are they supposed to be doing at that point in their life? Separating from home, becoming more adult, becoming more independent. And for many of them, the safest place to be is back at home. So you're thinking as a parent, great, my kid's here, I'm so happy. Maybe you're not, but some parents might be really happy their kids are there and the extra time they're spending together. The kids want to be growing up. So how can you as a parent support them having more independence, even if they're in your home? Because developmentally, that's where they're headed. And that's what they're supposed to be working on, is being more independent. So you may be thinking it's 9 o'clock in the morning, why aren't you up? You probably have work to do. But they're figuring out how to do that and have to figure out the consequences for their actions. So it really requires thinking about developmentally where people are along the whole way.
And then along those lines, I think it's about having those developmentally appropriate conversations with your kids about all the things that are going on right now, to really help them understand, you know, how do I regain some control in such an uncertain situation? How do I understand what's happening, both in terms of the virus, but also in terms of the racial and social injustices that we're seeing, in terms of the climate change reactions we're seeing with the environment, and really having those developmentally appropriate conversations, asking them questions, getting a sense of how they're feeling about things and what they know. And then your role is also to model for them calm behavior, because kids, regardless of age, pick up on how we're feeling and how we're doing. So even though we might be feeling stressed, and it's okay to feel stressed, it's really important to model how you engage in that self-care, because you're teaching them how important that is to maintain your emotional well-being, and then they'll learn how to do that too. Again, kids are can be very influenced. I worshiped my older brother, and he used to come home from school every day and tell me he had to do homework so he wouldn't play with me. So then I wanted to do homework, right? So kids kind of pick up on these things. They want to be like those that they idolize. So really, making sure you're making those things a priority, that you're having open conversations, answering questions truthfully, I think goes a long way to helping everyone feel more adjusted and handle the stress better.
Thank you so much. That hits home for a lot of us on this call and probably millions of Americans and people throughout the whole world. So thank you so much for that. I do have a lot of really good questions coming in. So let's move on to the next one. If you do suspect that a coworker is having a hard time, how do you recommend approaching them?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I think, you want to approach in a non-judgmental way. So it's really about, engaging in what we refer to as I statements, right? So it's approaching someone and saying, I've noticed that you seem more irritated lately. Is there anything that's going on? Is there anything I can help you with? I care about you and I'm really concerned. As opposed to saying things like, you're acting weird, you're not showing up for work, what are you doing? Because that's going to make the other person defensive, right? So we really want to approach people expressing how we feel and our concern, and then just opening the door for them to engage in dialogue. Sometimes people aren't going to take you up on it. They might just say they're fine, and at which point you say, well, I'm always here for you, right? You can always come to me and mean that. That means that you have to then actually follow through and maybe even check in with them again. Sometimes people really need help finding resources, and that can be a place that you can be helpful as well, even within your own employees. So maybe they don't know that you have an EAP plan or what your mental health resources are. So kind of helping direct them to that. And sometimes it's by actually being vulnerable and saying, when I was struggling, I used our mental health plan and I found it really helpful. Maybe that would be helpful for you. So it really is about reaching out again in a calm, non-judgmental kind of way to let them know that you're there and that you care about them. And then from there, they kind of have to take some steps themselves.
It's a great way to use employee listserv to just sort of generally say a very supportive message to everybody. Times are tough right now. Did you know we have access to an EAP? Or I was having trouble sleeping last week, thinking about everything that was going on. I found this great new app. Those are ways to get out messages that everyone sees, that's non-judgmental, even exposes your own vulnerability around things. So use the different tools of communication in the ways that can get information out. People need to see it and hear it in a couple different ways, a couple different times before they remember it. I think our communications guru told me one time, sometimes it can take up to 7 times before someone hears it and remembers it. So simply because you said something the first time does not mean that someone's going to pick up on it and follow up on it.
Great. Thank you very much. All right. On to the next one. How do we cultivate positive connections caused by social distancing? Many have lost connection due to the physical distancing.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I always use this story that explains something that I'm doing that I wouldn't have necessarily thought of doing before. I personally spend a lot of time in webinars and Zoom meetings, and like many of you, kind of wish I wasn't doing that all the time. But I also want to be connected to my parents who are 620 miles away. My dad is legally blind. We realized, so Zoom doesn't work so well for him, but we realized that a card game we both enjoy playing, we could play over the phone by calling out the cards as we played them, with each having our own deck of cards, because the cards that we actually needed were pretty minimal to play the hand. So now I have a standing date with my dad that he looks forward to every week. Tonight's cribbage night. We will be playing at 8 o'clock. And we do this, and he said to me one time, I hope we'll continue this after the pandemic. I'm like, yeah, why wouldn't we? So we have found that is one sort of individual way that we have connected. A couple other things that I know people have found helpful: watch a movie together. Pull up the same movie on Netflix or whatever, watch it at the same time as somebody who's far away. So you're sharing in an activity. You can laugh, you can cry about similar scenes. It's not just talk, because right now so many of us are like, oh yeah, the election's coming, I can't believe all the tension, or the infection rate's going up in my community, I'm really concerned about that, or oh my gosh, my kids are driving me crazy, right? Like, how many times can you say that? So find shared activities, read a book together and talk about it, watch a movie together, do a virtual museum tour of some place that you might not ever actually get to in real life because it's far away, but you could, many places are putting things online. Do it at the same time and talk about what you're seeing. Those are ways that you can share common interests that maybe you wouldn't have done before. So take advantage of the technology and make it work for you.
I also think, as this continues on, we do have to start sort of asking ourselves, where's that balance between making sure that we're protecting our physical health by physical distancing while also ensuring that we are protecting our mental health by maintaining social connections. So if you have been somebody who maybe up to this point has really been down on a lockdown, maybe it is safe for you to take that physically distanced walk with a friend in a forest preserve if you're both wearing masks, if that's something you haven't felt comfortable doing up to now. Maybe now is the time you can do that, provided that you're both following, the precautions that, the recommendations that ensure that you're being as safe as you possibly can. So I think it is a little bit about asking yourselves, are there some activities that I haven't felt comfortable doing but may be safe doing now that we know a little bit more about the disorder, about the virus and what's going on? I think that there is some successful ways to do potting, which is you and another family sort of making, again, that pact about what kind of precautions you're going to follow and then engaging together in some social way, even maybe still be outside, but having a barbecue together. We have separate plates and separate meals and whatnot, but you're still coming together in a new way. So I encourage people to, yes, think about how you can use technology, but to ask yourself, are there some things that I haven't done up to this point, but now may be more safe to do than say 4 or 5 months ago?
And along those
Great.
same lines, are you seeing that people are people coming in to speak with mental and behavioral health specialists more, or are they continuing to do so through telehealth, hotlines, things of that nature?
So Stephanie, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, the majority of practice right now is telehealth still. We are still seeing that it's the good thing is telehealth is effective. We know that, so people should not be concerned about that as a deterrent. Many people would like to be seen in person, and there are some sorts of conditions and concerns that actually that could be better for. We are seeing, just like Dr. Wright was talking about, safe, physically distanced hike with a friend, we're seeing some practices looking at, can we do a walk and talk kind of therapy where we agree to meet at outside where the practice is. We never meet inside. We both wear masks. There's some downsides to that, right? Potential for people seeing you with your therapist and they might be wondering who's your new friend and you have to decide what you're going to say. But if it's really important for you to be physically with that person and see that person, there's some ways to do that. So we are seeing that to some extent. The majority of care is virtual still, and we anticipate that's likely to continue that way for some time. But I want to encourage people, make sure people understand that even prior to the pandemic, we knew that this was an effective way to deliver care.
And by telehealth, we're really referring to both teleconferencing like this and a video platform, but also telephone only is another option when we're talking about telehealth. So it's not even, if you're somebody who's not comfortable with your smartphone or don't like to be on a screen, there are still other options to receive the care.
I love my telehealth visits. It's made my life a whole lot easier. I think most busy adults probably would agree with that line of thinking. So here's another question. You mentioned setting different expectations for the holidays that are coming up. How can parents explain to their children that certain traditions aren't going to happen?
I think part of it is figuring out go into it with some sense of what you think might be possible and might not be possible, and talk with your kids about that. If it won't be gathering with the whole extended family in the living room around the Christmas tree, or the family around the Thanksgiving table, what does that mean? And ask your kids, how would they like to do it? They may surprise you with what they say is most important to them, and really build on that. There are ways to, I've seen virtual Passover Seders and everybody's sort of logged on and showing each other on the screen. That's possible and might be important for some of these big holidays that are coming up, to have ways to ensure that the people you would routinely gather with, you still connect with. But I think it's also an opportunity to decide what's really important to you as a family. If what's really important to you as a family is the shared time with your immediate family, you focus on that. If what's really important to you as a family is certain aspects of the religious holidays coming up, focus on that. If what's really important to you as a family is in decorating outside, maybe that's, I'm kind of wondering if my neighborhood's going to see a boom in outdoor decorations, because people will be around and might think that's a way to give a little winter joy to everyone around me. Focus on some new things that you might do, and you might surprise yourself by realizing there's some opportunities here that we didn't realize we had. But it is going to be hard for some kids who particularly really like, we always have done this. As parents, one of our goals for our kids is to help them grow up to be flexible and adaptable adults. So it might be really hard right now, but having that in your mind helps to think about, okay, my goal with my kid is to help them be more flexible and adaptable. So we'll talk about this, and yep, this year we're going to have to adapt and do things a little bit differently. And we can decide, what do we really like, what worked, what would we like to be able to bring back next year, and let them know that it doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, and there's an opportunity for input.
Yeah, I think the part I was going to piggyback on is also helping kids gain some perspective, right? It feels like this is never going to end, but feelings are not facts. This will end at some point. I don't know what it's going to look like on the other side of it necessarily, but it's not going to be like this forever. So helping kids also understand that, you know, just because it's like this right now doesn't mean it's going to be like this, say, next year or the year after that, is also an important message, I think, to get across. And again, to fall back on remembering what do you value during this time of year? Is it your spirituality? Is it your family? Is it reflecting and being grateful for what you have? And how can you still incorporate those values even if the structure looks a little bit different? Great.
Thank you very much. We'll get to one or two more questions and then we're going to call it a day. But this has been extremely helpful, and I'm sitting here taking notes myself for my family, my children, and holidays and so forth. What do you have ideas for helping build employee morale remotely, stuff not at work but for work?
Yeah, I think in some ways that's a tough one. I think at the beginning people were relying on things like Zoom happy hours and conversation hours, and I think all that sort of Zoom time that we needed at the beginning, I don't know that we necessarily need anymore. So I think in part to build morale, I think it's a little bit of a recalibration, like I said before, to really identify when do meetings need to be Zoom meetings and when can they be like a walk and talk meeting, right? So sort of freeing people up from the sense of, I always have to be on camera all the time on these Zoom meetings, hour after hour after hour. Not everything needs to be that extreme. And so then I think it's about finding ways to show that you value employees, whether that's through, again, making sure they have the resources they need if they're working from home, right? So if they don't have access to a desk or a chair or adequate computer equipment, how can you help them get those? Because that's going to help boost morale. If you feel like you're more effective at your job, that does help. But also, some of the other intangible things like letting them know that you care. Again, making sure you're engaging in really good communication about what's going on. Everything's already uncertain. I don't want to have to wait week after week to know how much longer I'm going to be telecommuting, right? You want to be able to provide them with as much resources and information as they can, and then that sort of praise and ways to let people know that you're all in it together.
Acknowledge the hard work people are doing. Make sure we do not give enough positive reinforcement. So find ways to do that and be specific and concrete about it. You really handled that difficult patient well. Thank you so much for taking the initiative and reaching out to that person who was unhappy. I'm so happy with how things resolved. That really helps. Notice those kinds of things. It can be great if you've got the opportunity to give people a 3-day weekend, a bonus time off. Really feels amazing to individuals, and it's nice when everyone has it at the same time, because that means that it's great to take time off, but when I take time off, Nobody else did. And I have an email inbox that is so full. If we all don't work, I have much less from my colleagues. So there are ways even like that to try to support people. I've read about people, sending, gift boxes to all their employees so everybody gets it on the same day. That may not be feasible economically for some places, but there's ways to let people know that they're acknowledged and valued for what they do, whether it's the on the spot specific recognition, which actually means a lot, to the gestures and gifts that are bigger. Those are great, but people really remember when you say, thanks, Mike, you did a great job with that. It was so clear and well put together, and I'm so happy that you were part of that team.
Great. That definitely made me feel better, you just saying that right then. All right, last question, and then we're going to head out for the day. Do you have any tips for providers to offer their clients who will be trying mental health services for the first time through telehealth?
I mean, I think it's great to tell them it works, that they shouldn't be concerned that it's not going to be as effective. I think it's really important to help people know that it actually may give them a little more flexibility. They might be able to better match with somebody who has a particular expertise or other characteristics that they're interested in, because a lot of times we based on who's nearest to us. But telehealth might allow you to see somebody who's still within your state. We don't have to get into all the issues around licensure and everything, but still within your state, but has the kind of expertise you need, or has the language you need, or has whatever sort of connections that are going to be valuable. So there's some pluses there. We are finding that many people actually don't want to go back to in person. The convenience of checking in from home is really, really good. But I would still encourage people to treat it like it is therapy. So don't keep a meeting to go to 3 and then log into your therapy appointment. Give yourself a transition time both before to gather yourself to think about what do you need to bring into session and afterwards, because part of therapy can get into hard stuff. And you want to have time to sort of wrap that up and pull it together before you go back to what you're doing next. Treat it like it's really an in-person session. So you're going to want to encourage people to, be on time, dress appropriately. You want to talk with them. Their therapist should do this too, but you talk with them about you want to ensure confidentiality and privacy. Think about when you're going to be able to have these kinds of sessions so that you're not going to be interrupted. Those kinds of things are important to think about as well. Hopefully the therapist is going to go over all of that, but it's nice to hear it, as I said a couple times, to remember to do those things.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to wrap it up. I want to share with you once again that if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our phone number and email are attached here. I want to thank very much our panelists today, Lynn, Vale, and Nisha. You guys did a fantastic job. Thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, you have our contact information. I will be sending the video afterwards. And everyone have a safe, wonderful rest of this week. Thank you very much and have a great day.